For as long as I can remember, kids have not been for me. And that goes all the way back to being a small girl with dolls and prams and stuff, and just there never being a, I want this. I guess maybe that's not what you have at that age, but it was just never, it was always
Yeah.
a toy. And I never had that feeling, that essence, that maternal pull, that instinctual, I want this.
I'm Keltie McGuire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. Okay, today I'm going to do something a little different than normal. I usually do a nice little bio read for our upcoming guest, set up the conversation a bit. I'm going to say virtually nothing except that you are in store for a beautiful, profound, interesting, moving conversation with today's guest, Charlotte Holmes. She makes a beautiful introduction to herself in just a moment. So let's just get into today's conversation. Hello, Miss Charlotte Holmes, as she's known on Instagram. Thank you for being here. I'm just going to get you to tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've got a lot that you can share. I find you to be a very interesting person. So what do we need to know?
Oh, goodness. This is the bit I hadn't prepared for. What do you need to know? I'm a 36-year-old, child-free by choice, yoga teacher, holistic health coach, and former model who dabbles a little bit slightly still in that world as and when the right stuff comes up. I live half my time in India and the other half I tour around Europe, sharing yogic teachings. In the 6 months I'm in India, I'm living and working and serving at a school, a yoga school there. I've been in the health and wellness scene alongside my modeling since I was about 22. Started as a personal trainer, so it all came through a very strong love for movement and moving my body. I have a strong love for seeing different places, being in different places, experience different cultures, traveling. And so luckily my career has lent itself to that quite nicely. I've got a sister, a mum and a dad, a dog that's 5, a new partner, I'm divorced, and I've donated my eggs twice, soon to be 3 times this year, hopefully. I think that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that was an amazing setup. And I'm sure people are listening thinking, oh my gosh, there's more. And how old is she? She sounds like she's lived like 15 lives. I always enjoy so much connecting with people who have like a really, their lives are such a rich tapestry of all these different experiences and relationships. And I think all of us are like that in a sense, but yeah. Okay, let's delve into it. So let's talk about the child-free choice to start. And of course, that's going to be sort of the thread that runs through a lot of our conversation. Did you always know that kids were not for you? Or when did you arrive at that decision?
For as long as I can remember, kids have not been for me. And that goes all the way back to being a small girl with dolls and prams and stuff, and just there never being a, I want this. I guess maybe that's not what you have at that age, but it was just never, it was always a toy. And I never had that feeling, that essence, that maternal pull, that instinctual, I want this. It was just something that I didn't ever think that I wanted. I was like, no, I don't want to have children, because if I have children at a younger age, if I have children, then I can't travel, I can't do these things. And so perhaps when I was younger, it was from a space of, I don't want them, because if I choose that, then I'm foregoing these other things that I want to do more.
Yeah.
So that was the earlier days. And then I guess as I grew into my 20s, living in London, modeling, traveling a lot, there wasn't any time, and I still wasn't interested. It wasn't something that came into my radar, onto my agenda. So never felt that pull. I then met a guy who also didn't want children, and we were together and we traveled and we had an amazing time and we got married, and we both didn't want children. And so here I was in my early 30s, married to a man that wasn't interested in having children either. And so we were building a life together on that basis. And so, it's always just been a easeful, clear no for me.
Everyone listening is like super envious of you.
I know. I'm really aware, actually, since I've
Yeah.
been donating my eggs more recently in my life. I've been having more open conversations about this topic,
Yeah.
and I understand that I'm in a very small camp that no, they don't want, and then there's a small camp that no, they do want, and I know there's a big load
Yeah.
of women in the middle that just don't know, and so I understand. Yeah, I'm very grateful to be
Yeah.
where I'm at. It's
Yeah.
a good place to be, and
You know what? I really appreciate what you just said about the fact that there's a small percentage of people on either end of that spectrum, and most people live in the middle. And I think that's something that most people aren't aware of and don't see, because the impression that I had when I was on the fence about this decision, and that I hear from so many of my clients and listeners, is that, well, people just inherently know they want to be a mom. That's the most commonplace thing, right? I've always wanted this more than anything. And a smaller percentage of people say, yeah, like you, I just never, ever wanted children. But I still think there's so little conversation about ambivalence, being in that gray zone, not knowing. And so, certainly appreciate that that may not be your story, but this is complicated for so many people. And I think that it's actually something really beautiful to, when we are stuck, when we're in the middle, we might think like, what can I learn from someone like Charlotte? Because she just always knew. I mean, she doesn't know what it is to be on the fence. That being said, I'm sure, first of all, I'm sure you've experienced some indecision and ambivalence in other areas of your life, but I also think it's like a really beautiful, shining example of like, this is how certainty can look and feel. And you also serve as someone who, that sort of unwavering nature of like, no, this is me, this is my path. Again, that's a really nice example for people who are unsure, because it is possible, it is available, even if you first were on the fence.
Absolutely. And I think for many women, and for many women I've spoken to and encountered, they have never considered there's a choice.
Absolutely.
They have, for whatever reason, felt that it's just something that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's got them into all sorts of trouble further down the line, right? Either when they can't have children for whatever reason, and then they're like, oh, but it's just what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And then there's resistance sometimes from people where they're like, well, what do you mean you don't want them? Like, and they're almost offended.
Yeah.
Because they've chosen to. And I think that comes from a lack of ever feeling they had a choice. And I think, it's important. Of course we have a choice. I have had a choice. I'm in the position I'm in, and I have had that choice, and I've considered it strongly, especially over the last 5-6 years. Really, really thought about it, because for me, it's the single biggest decision you make as a human, to bring another child, another human, and to raise another human. For me, that's the single biggest choice that you can make. And we have a choice, and I'm choosing not.
Yeah. I'm curious. You mentioned, and I want to hear, what in the last 5-6 years have caused you to even more really like double down on like, is this that path for me, or to reaffirm that for yourself? Was there ever a wavering, or was there ever like, did you face anyone or any factors in your life that made you second guess that innate knowing?
No, but I never second guessed my innate knowing. No. And were there moments where I was questioned, where by society, by family, by friends, by different situations? Absolutely. And all the time, and still.
Okay.
So yes, there's often, and this is why we're having these conversations, right?
Yeah.
There's always moments where it comes up, and I've never questioned this relationship that I have to me is the strongest relationship I know.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's no doubt. There's not an ounce of, maybe not at all. Which again is I am aware is a privileged position to be, and I've worked hard to get here. It wasn't something I just stumbled across. There's been a long journey of inward adventuring and venturing and seeking, and eventually discovering the truth of who I am. And we'll get into this, I'm sure. But so no, it's never been I've never questioned myself.
Yeah. I'm very excited to talk about this a little bit later in the conversation, because there is a huge part of this kids or child-free decision. We could say the entirety of it that really has to do with knowing yourself. It's to do with trusting yourself, which I find a lot of women in particular really struggle to feel like they can trust their own feelings and their own desires. And so, yeah, I'm definitely eager to hear a little bit. It's, as you say, it's been a long inner journey, and one that I'm sure continues. But by cultivating that of utmost importance, number one, relationship with ourselves, I think that is probably, in a perfect world, the way forward for anyone making this decision, right? Like, I mean, of course, we can base it on other external factors, but ultimately it comes down to ourselves and what we desire in our lives and what feels authentic and right for us.
Yeah.
What's happened in the last 5-6 years that's made you, I'm hearing not so much a reevaluation. I can't remember the language that you used, but you did mention there's been more of maybe an exploration of this child-free decision.
I think mainly my age, biological age, getting married, getting divorced, finding a new partner. There's been more conversations around it. So I've been, what comes with that is a deeper self-inquiry, because it's not that I'm questioning, did I make the right choice? But I want to understand this choice on a deeper level. I want to keep unpacking this.
Yeah.
Because that's important, because we're constantly changing, right? We're constantly evolving. I'm interested in constantly evolving and constantly getting to know myself better. And so with that, there comes this curiosity of, okay, well, where does this decision come from? And why is it this way? And in this lifetime, why is it that this is how it is? And so, there's been beautiful opportunities in the last 5 years to really look into that on a deeper level. And my granny died. Actually, that's probably and that ties in nicely to when I first decided to donate my eggs, coincidentally. But my granny was 102 when she passed away 2 years ago in December. And she was just such a legend and such a powerhouse of a woman for me. And I just loved her so much. We were very close. And she, at 102, just presumed that as a married woman, which I was at the time, that I was going to have children. Like, it just didn't come into her radar that not having a baby as a woman was even a decision that I would even think to make. And so she never really knew that I didn't want kids, because I just think it would have really crushed her. Like, it really would have saddened her existence, because to her, that is meaning, that is life. I mean, she had 2 kids, 6 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren, and a great-great-grandchild when she passed away. And so family, that essence of family for her was what made sense. It was what she was here to do. And therefore, as a woman, it was what I was here to do. And it never made sense to tell her otherwise. So my ex-husband and I, we got a dog, and for a while the dog was fun, and that was a thing. And then she dropped her body, like I said, 2 years ago in December. And when she died, I revisited one of the last things she said to me. I wasn't there when she died. I was in India. And one of the last things she said to me was, like, one of the last things she asked was, when are you and James going to have babies? Like, when are you going to give me babies? And it really just, it sat with me, because I never had the courage to tell her that I didn't want them, but it was, the decision to not tell her was coming from a place of just pure love for her, because I just didn't have the heart to disappoint her, I guess. And it's interesting, because I don't feel like that with anyone else. I couldn't care less what anyone else thinks. But with her, it's just this special, beautiful relationship that I just wanted her to, and she left this planet, hoping, and that was good enough for me. So, and then in that process, I'm an IVF baby. My parents went through IVF with both my sister and I. Okay. And when Granny died, I had this moment, and it was actually in a meditation one morning. I had this like deep insight into like IVF and eggs, and I had all these like visualizations around like embryos and these different things and life cycles, and because Granny had gone, and I was just going through all this stuff in my head, I got lost in this like place. And I suddenly was like, wow, like, but I could donate my eggs. And this just inspiration just arrived. And I was like, oh yeah, I donate my blood and I've donated my hair before. Yeah, you could donate your eggs. And it just arrived in the field of my consciousness. And that was it. Then I was on this hard blown mission to donate my eggs. And at 34, I had no clue what it involved, because I'd never tried to get pregnant, right? And I wasn't interested in kids. So I had no clue what was involved, how it worked. I knew a bit because I had friends that had gone through it. My parents had gone through IVF. But ultimately, they didn't have a clue. I said, right, let's go. And so I ended up at the London Egg Bank, which is part of the London Women's Clinic in London Bridge, having all these tests to see what my AMH levels were like and to see what my egg reserve was like, and to find out and to dig into all of these things that I just knew nothing about because I didn't need to. And yeah, then luckily that was how I started unearthing and pulling back all of that to then donate my eggs. And luckily I could, and I did, and it was an amazing experience. But it was Granny that was the catalyst, and the death of her that spurred that process on. Yeah, I don't know how I got to there, but I did.
Yeah, no, and there's lots of tracks we got to go back and cover. No, it's I mean, we can't possibly cover it all, but I'm curious, when you had that, and perhaps it's not even something you can put words to, but when you had that moment in the meditation and like this notion of I'm going to donate my eggs came up, what do you think that driver or desire was for you? And like you talked about kind of all these different images swirling and thinking about life cycles and change, like what has been that driver or motivation for you, do you think, doing that? Or maybe there's a few different ones at play.
It felt like quite like an intentional act. It just felt very intuitive, and like that was what was needed. That's what needed to happen. And maybe I can't put words to it. I'm not sure. I think that was it. It was like, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And not to, I wasn't seeking to create a family or a bond with any of these kids, right? That's not, it wasn't for family because I don't want that. It was almost like, I guess it was the facilitation of giving back, offering up something of me so that someone else could experience the fullness of what they want to experience with parenthood. But that's really where it begins and ends in terms of like, just that was the egg donation thing is that. It's like a practical sense. It was like, okay, I can give you this and someone else can experience it. And that felt very intentional. So I think it's that, as simple as that.
You also sort of inferred, so you mentioned you were an IVF baby yourself. Were you an egg donation or IVF with your parents' own sperm and
with
eggs?
With my parents' own.
Okay.
So biologically, I'm both my parents that raised me. Yeah. So and interestingly, I've now donated once to the egg bank, once to a couple where it's my egg and his sperm. So she's going to be having half and half, and the couple I'm helping this year are actually they're going to go through a surrogate as well. So I've kind of done a few of the different routes, and it's been so interesting to see all of those. But I'm my mum and dad's DNA, as is my sister. And I think, I'm 36. I think when my parents went through that process, there weren't huge amounts of options. Like that was just
even IVF must have been very new.
It was new. Yeah, it was within the first, I think, 2 or 3 years. I think the first IVF baby, Louise Brown, was only 3 or 4 years older than what I am now. So it was very fresh in its kind of arrival on this planet. And so it was just, they were like, oh, what's this? Like, sure, let's do it. And through we came.
And do you think because you were an IVF baby, like there was maybe a greater openness to, like, did it feel like a point of connection for you in the decision to donate eggs, or something totally different, like unrelated?
No, I think it's all connected. I think it's definitely all connected. Like it's definitely a web of what makes me who I am. And so I've been aware that I'm an IVF baby forever. It's something that my parents openly told us both about. It's something I've always found very interesting. I've got a picture of me at 2 cells Like, how cool is that? Like, remember picture your earliest picture of you, and there's a picture my parents have got of me. I'm two cycles when that's split into two cells, and so I think it's fascinating what they could do then, and what they could do now is even more fascinating. Is even more transformative and beautiful for so many families, and just to be able to be a part of that and facilitate that process for someone. It felt very intentional, and I guess being an IVF baby, it definitely plays into it for sure. Can't ignore that.
Yeah. Were you with your former husband when you first donated your eggs?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we were together for the first round of donation. I mean, we were legally married. Together is an optional wording, but we were. Yes, I was still married, and he was with me, and he didn't. I felt very alone in the process the first time. I
was going to ask about how that was in relationship with him, and his thoughts or feelings, or maybe irrelevant.
It coincided with a period of time where our relationship was falling apart due to other things that were going on, and therefore the process, the practicality around the process, where you spend 2 weeks injecting hormones and going through a whole thing, he was very distant. So I experienced it in a very alone state, and that was exactly what was necessary. That was exactly what I needed to do at that time. It felt great, and so it didn't matter. But yes, we were together, and he was very supportive always when I said it was what I wanted to do. He thought it was a brilliant and beautiful thing, and he was very supportive. Just not there as much, but that was again because of other reasons, other things.
Okay. We had an episode for anyone who's interested in hearing more about egg freezing with Sophia, who was on several episodes ago. She has a documentary that was actually on Guardian Documentaries called Harvest, about freezing her eggs. So we went into some of the particulars with that, but I'm interested from your perspective, and you're in the UK like she is. Like, first of all, are egg donors paid? Are they sometimes paid? How does that work? If I can be so bold and nosy as to ask, which I know you said I can.
You can be. Go far away. So you're not paid, but there's a compensation style of payment that you're legally allowed, but the amount is the amount, and it can't waver from that. Okay. So there's a fee that is given, and it's essentially to cover, I guess, travel expenses or expenses that you incur during the period of time where you're going to and from the clinics, etc. Okay. And when I first donated, and last year when I donated, it was £750.
Okay.
And this year it's gone up. It went up in October last year to, I think, 990-ish. So let's ballpark it at £1,000.
Yeah.
You get £1,000's worth of money to cover expenses.
Okay. Yeah.
But you're not paid, which I understand in other countries you're paid. Sometimes huge sums of money, which again, that's not what happens in the UK, and also just not why. I mean, if you're donating your eggs in the UK for money, you're in the wrong place, because you're not going to. That's not. But so no, you're not paid as such. There's an expense that's covered, and traveling in and out of London and to and around London is expensive. Staying there is expensive if you're not living there. So that money is absorbed into the experience of what you're taking on. So it has to come from a deeper place than just.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm curious, we'll talk sort of about I don't want to say the emotional side of things, but this piece of like, there's a part of me that is now being made to use to create a human. But just from a practical standpoint, and the emotions around this process of all the hormones and like the process of getting your eggs extracted, is that the right term?
Yes.
It sounds very, I guess it's scientific and medical. I mentioned to you, Charlotte, I was talking with my husband about this conversation yesterday, and who I was having on, and I've told him a little bit about what's involved with both egg freezing for women who want to preserve their fertility, but also for egg donation. He's like, that's a really big deal. There's like a lot of potential risks associated with that. Isn't there? And all the hormones women have to take. And he goes, it's a lot different than a man just going and ejaculating, which is arguably a very pleasurable, brief experience. Totally different. Right. So what was that experience like for you? And did it ever feel like it was to your own detriment, health-wise, mentally, emotionally, to do this?
No, I never thought about those things. I
Yeah,
never went into it thinking, oh, but the risk. I mean, there's a risk
yeah,
stepping out the front door in the morning, right? Like,
absolutely.
there's a risk living. So, like, I'm someone that lives, so that doesn't ever really come onto my radar. You know, they go through all the pros and cons with you,
Yeah.
and because I donated to the egg bank first and foremost the first time round, it's a relatively rigorous process versus donating to a couple privately, in terms of you can only donate up to your 35th birthday, because they have to cut off the age at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a good chance of getting a good amount of eggs, or the egg bank, because they're paying for the process, they just don't bother. So in order for me to go through that process with them, I knew that it was going to be a good haul, if you like, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And that was just the most important thing for me. I was like, if I can help some families, on a practical sense.
Yeah.
And then the process itself was, tiring and hot and sticky and swollen and hormone fueled. And I was fully prepared for what was going to come. And it was tough.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And I knew it would be a lot, and it was a lot. So I don't want to sit here and say it was an easy process. It absolutely wasn't. And I've done it again. So I think there's just, you make a choice, right? Why am I doing this? What's the intention? What's the purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And when that outweighs, the desire to fulfill that outweighs anything else, that's just where you go, and that's where the eggs went into that basket. And so I didn't consider, but it's intense protein. I mean, you're in 2 lots of injections a day for sort of up to 14 days, and it's a lot, and you're giving someone else an opportunity to have a child. 2 weeks of injections don't really seem like very much to me. Like for me, it was something of a no-brainer. Like, and I look after myself. I look after my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health. I didn't go into it lightly, and I looked after myself during the process, before the process, after the process, and I continue to look after myself to make sure I was in and am in a good place to manage whatever was going to come my way, during that process and during that choice. So
So I don't know how anybody thinks about this decision, as far as I'm guessing there's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different sort of understandings in terms of the relationships we have with our own genetic material, and specifically the egg or the sperm. And so I have to say, for me, it's nothing I've considered personally, but I imagine there's both people listening, and I'll say candidly for myself, this thought of, that is a part of me that is going to create a child that biologically is half my child. And that there may be a sense of like, there's a part of me out in this world, and you can help me with this, right? As the good yogi spiritual teacher, but like this sense of control almost, right? Of like, but that's a part of me, and I want a relationship with that part of me. And despite myself not wanting kids, what was that like for you in terms of, I guess, how do you view, or what is your understanding, both intellectually as well as emotionally, your relationship with the child or children that, now I'm curious, have kids been born and they more will be? Like, how does that work as far as how long's the time frame of when this can go or happen? And is there a limit on how many children you might have? And I don't even want to use the language children you might have, because again, I want to hear about your relationship with it. There's my 5 questions rolled in.
Thank you. So I'll start with the piece around just how it feels and how that. So I guess from a practical sense, I don't see myself as a mother to any child born from any of the eggs I've donated. A mother is someone that raises and loves and nurtures a human, and so biology's got nothing to do with that. On a deeper level, I guess that, of course I reflect on the souls that will come through in the donations I make, of course. And while I may never meet them, there's this this quiet sort of like reverence there. And it's nice to think that I played a small part and a meaningful part in like helping that soul come into this manifest reality. Like, that brings me a lot of peace. It brings me a lot of joy and bliss to feel that.
Mm,
And then I guess philosophically, it's just a really interesting space to sit in because I've genetically contributed to a human being, which could never know, will probably never know.
yeah.
Many human beings, perhaps, that I'll never know. But for me, there's a real mystery in that. Like,
Mm,
I find a real beauty in not needing to claim the connection or define the connection.
yeah.
Like, I can honor it, like fully honor it from this space and not need to know anything more about it.
Yeah.
I, it just, that's it for me. And then from a
Yeah.
real feminist perspective, like it feels very empowering. It's my body, it's my choice. It's my conscious decision to sort of choose to contribute in this way, without it needing to lead to motherhood. And it's so nice because it's just a clear reminder that motherhood doesn't hinge on being a mother. You can mother other things. Nurturing can take so many different forms beyond parenting. And I experience that a lot in my teachings, and I lean into that a lot when I have clients from a yogic perspective and teaching spiritually. It's really about, like, we have this misunderstanding in the West that mothering is this
Yeah.
very niche box and it has to look a certain way. And it's just not true. It's just
Absolutely.
not how it is or how it should be or how it needs to be. And we must talk more freely and liberally about how this is, because it's important, because especially for women that can't have children and desperately want their own. Okay, but there's other things, there's other ways. And once you free yourself of this misunderstanding, all of these opportunities open up. And that's such a liberating place. It's such a liberating place to be.
All right, I have a very important invitation to make, and that is to join us for one of our upcoming Kids or Child-Free workshops. If you have not attended one of these 2-hour workshops and you are unsure whether you should have kids or stay child-free, this is the next thing on your to-do list to getting clear on the right choice for you. Head to kidsorchildfree.com. I will also link to our workshop page in the show notes and get all the details on this 2-hour live online workshop that's going to help you get more clarity and direction in terms of whether a future with kids or a future without them is the right path for you. Tickets are only $45, and we have these workshops every month or two, so you should be able to find a date and time that works for you. If you can't join the upcoming date, make sure you sign up for emails so that you can get notified when the next date is announced. That's so powerful what you share. And I just want to say, I think what you are doing and have done is incredibly beautiful. It is such a gift. And I want to be mindful. When I say, from my own perspective, it might feel like this, and that's kind of a strange thing. I realize so much of that just has to do with my own way of viewing and understanding things. And I think you have such like a beautiful sort of like really zoomed out sort of elevated perspective on all of this and how the interplay between your decision and these lives that will be lived. And so I just, I think it's a wonderful gift. I think it's really important what you say about, this idea of mothering or nurturing and how that can show up and manifest itself in different ways. And I would argue the same for ideas of purpose, meaning, fulfillment. I mean, first of all, in general, and I'm fully of the belief there are so many different paths and ways to have all of those things in our life and to express those things. But to your point, I also think it's exceptionally dangerous, in particular for those people who they really would like to be parents and that isn't possible for them. And so it seems unreasonable to think, I know life can be unfair in other ways, but to think that like now that part of yourself can't be expressed, or now you can't have that kind of human experience or connection. I just think absolutely no way. Of course, there's other vehicles for that. And so I'm jumping ahead because I want us, there are so many different things, and we'll backtrack in the story and the conversation, but maybe we can actually speak a little bit to this idea of, well, I mean, I don't want to say they're interchangeable, but mothering, nurturing, purpose, contribution, there's some similarities and overlap there. And I'm curious how you would encourage someone, especially someone who is considering or maybe have chosen that child-free path, who's feeling like, am I going to be missing out on all these things because I'm not having a kid or kids? How might they think about that and kind of create their own relationship with those concepts?
I think a lot of it boils down to having meaning or purpose, right? A feeling of the question of meaning. Like, what is meaningful to me? What is my purpose? And again, there's this misunderstanding around having to have a purpose.
Yeah.
I've always felt more interested in living purposefully, irrespective of what I'm doing. Can I live purposefully? And then it doesn't matter what I'm doing, right? If I'm a mother, if I'm a sister, if I'm a teacher, if I'm a whatever it is, student, and no matter what I'm doing, if I'm a CEO, or if I'm cleaning toilets, or if I'm sat by the river or running an ultra marathon, I'm still living purposefully. So for me, that's always been my greatest interest, has been, can I live from that space? But I think the question of meaning, like from the context of choosing child-free, it's often just an ego identity piece, right? So like in the West, we're conditioned to believe that in order to be someone, to be successful, we have to attach ourselves to this rigid roles of mother, CEO, creator, healer, whatever you are, right? But from the yogic lens, these are all just hats we wear. They're just temporary garments that we put on to fulfill a role for a time, but they're not who we are. They're not our true essence. And so our true essence, what we learn is in yoga, our true essence, it goes beyond identification. It's the witnessing consciousness that is nobody and everybody all at the same time. So if to chase purpose through an external role alone, whether that's when you want to be a parent or whether you want to build a business, is to really misunderstand the nature of the self, because the true meaning actually arises not from what you do, what you achieve, how many promotions you get, how much money is in your bank account, but how awake are we in each moment of our being. That's where meaning comes. So choosing to live a life without children for me wasn't about replacing, it wasn't an identity. It wasn't saying this is me and I'm child-free by choice and I'm wearing this hat. In the same way as it's not about me choosing to become a nomad and not live anywhere, or choosing to be a yoga teacher, or choosing to create a business. It was about being really honest with myself. How do I unhook from all of these different narratives and these different learnings and things I've been told about my life needing to be a certain way in order to be meaningful or worthwhile? Because it's such a patriarchal capitalist lens and notion, right? Like a woman must justify her existence through production or legacy. Bollocks. That's just the biggest load of bollocks that exists. It's not true. And so yoga's just really, I'm so grateful for these teachings, because it's just taught me to just dissolve all of those attachments. And actually, once you drop beneath the noise of what the mind is saying to you constantly, there's this vast stillness. And that's where your wholeness lies. That's where meaning lives. That's where it resides. And that's it. And that's the presence that we speak about, the void. And as you start to cultivate that relationship through these practices, that starts to bubble up and bubble over into your existence, into your day-to-day life, into the roles that you play, the person that you are, in the way that you serve, and the way that you work, and in your awareness. That's what bubbles up and bubbles over. And that can be whether I'm teaching or speaking or writing or holding space or not doing anything. It even bubbles up in those moments where I'm sat in silence, when I'm meditating, when I'm walking my dog. So it's not a performance either. It's just this truth, this essence that is within. That's where meaning lies. And so I wish that, to all the women who really feel they need to do something
Mm-hmm.
substantial instead of having children, right? To all those women that are saying, oh, I'm child-free by choice and therefore I have to do something else. Your life is already substantial. Your life is already so substantial and worthy and beautiful. You're not a project to be improved. Like, your worth isn't conditional on the impact that you have. It's okay to have a quiet life. You know, are you being true to yourself? That's the most important question you have to ask. Am I being true to myself? And that is where meaning arises. Let that arise from the being that you are, not the things that you're doing. And if you can really lean into that, the being, the human being, the essence, wow, there's such vastness within that. The rest of it, I promise you, will drop away. That was a short answer.
No, this is incredible. I'm like hanging on every word. And we've addressed this question or concern about like the something else I feel I have to do instead, the contribution I need to make, et cetera. And I think some people, myself included, we got to go back and we got to re-listen to that. Right. And of course the next step is like, how are we going to do all that? But it's so profound what you share, and you're articulating something that I haven't always been able to put into words, but I mean, we can just exist. We don't have to do anything. We get to be. And of course, if I sometimes think people ask this question of like, what else, what next, what instead? Yes, certainly based on, like you say, those sort of overarching narratives and pressures that we face. I think sometimes also there is that drive to experience something more or different or deeper than the way that we're living. And so I guess there's also an attunement to how much of this is coming from an outside perspective or sense of I have to versus I want to or I get to, and my life can be something beyond how I'm living it. But I think that, to your point, like all those hats we wear, all the things we do, those can be a vehicle for a purpose or a contribution, but it's not the thing in and of itself. Like I am deeply passionate about the work that I do. It feels very purposeful and important to me. It feels just as meaningful when I have a really heartfelt conversation with somebody that I bump into on the street. Like it's not just about this, it's about everything else. And to your point, it's like how I show up in the world. It's in every conversation I have. It's in noticing things around me. And again, it's hard to like articulate that, but I think meaning and purpose, it's everything. Yeah. So, okay. So how do we connect with this like true essence of ourselves? I mean, this is sort of a Cole's Notes, as we'd say in Canada, Cliff Notes is in the USA. What did we don't even have, they don't exist anymore. What's it called in the UK? Like the study cheat notes you had with a summary of the book where you didn't have to read it.
The cheat sheet. I know there was a book, there were these books called, it was like Computers for Dummies. So maybe it's yoga for dummies.
Yeah, it's that sort of thing. Okay, I think everyone knows the For Dummies books. That's a better reference. But maybe just one small step, because what I hear from people is like, how do I know what I want? I have no idea. There's so many different voices telling us, but you should want this and you need to do this and you have to do that. And a good woman does this. And I think there's a real, I know, if a good woman does it, don't do it. Run. But I think, when you talk about unhooking from these narratives, how do we do that? And how do we actually learn to trust that what we're feeling is true and that it's not out of fear? It's not because someone said we should.
Beautiful question. And ultimately, it takes work. There's work involved. So I'll just prerequisite this whole answer.
Yeah, please.
It takes work. I mean, yoga's been such a profound guide in helping me to live more truthfully. Like I've been practicing yoga asana, which is the movement element of yoga, since I was about 19 or 20. But it took into my later 20s till I really started to get into a more deep spiritual practice with meditation and other things. But when it comes to just so you've got a timeline reference, I'm just saying that for a timeline reference, but especially when it comes to sort of bigger life decisions, right? Like choosing to be child-free or choosing to have kids, yoga really taught me that the clarity it doesn't come from a forcing of an answer. It comes from creating enough space and enough stillness to hear the truth that's already inside of you. So when it comes to wanting to get clear on your desires, because also you say, I'm saying, oh, it's beautiful to have a quiet life. It's also beautiful to choose to have a busy life, but it has to be coming from that space of truth within you. What is true for me? So when you think of practices like meditation, right, and breath work, self-inquiry, it's never about arriving at the right answer. There's no right answer, but rather it's, how do I continue to peel back the layers of conditioning and fear and expectation, and because we all carry these unconscious ideas. We all carry them, whether you think you do or not, they're there, right? And unless you actively examine them, and you've got to be really vigilant, because they don't disappear either. I still I spend time daily examining them. So we all carry these unconscious ideas about what we should do. And especially there's a heavy one around motherhood. What yoga asks us to look at and look underneath is all of those stories. Who am I when I am not performing any of those roles? What am I truly longing for beneath the noise? And you use these techniques, meditation, breathwork, asana, kriya, to draw yourself into that space. And what happens, the more time, as with anything, the more time you spend in that space, cultivating this vertical relationship, this inside relationship, that voice and that connection, that relationship gets stronger. The voice becomes one that you listen to. And so the query around, do I listen or do I know, dissolves, because it's a knowing. There's no question anymore. The voice becomes very clear. The cultivation of, like you said, self-trust becomes the next part of the journey. And so again, and in yoga, we call this tapas, and it's like your inner fire. It's this discipline to stay true to yourself. So for me, this self-trust, it never came from an external validation. It was never, oh, you achieved this, you did this, oh, well done, well done, well done. It came from consistently showing up to my practice and realizing that I can hold myself through whatever's coming at me. When Granny died, could stay upright. When my husband had an affair with my best friend, could stay upright. Through all the rounds of donating my eggs, stayed upright. Through, these things, life happens. And this isn't about saying, oh, I've gone through these things and therefore my life's been hard. No, life is hard at times. If you're not experiencing it, you're not living. There's this ebb and flow and this up and down of life. And so it's about saying, within this living experience, my relationship to self and this vertical upright has become so strong that I can hold myself through discomfort. I can hold myself through doubt. I can still remain anchored into my true self. And so I can say, no, thank you, with all my love, and mean it fully, irrespective of the choice. And yes, please, the choice and the what I want is so sure that there isn't a question.
Yeah.
I can choose the life that looks different, and still I'm whole because it's coming from here.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly above all of this is this element that, again, yoga teaches us, is this non-judgment, right? Non-judgment, especially of self-compassion. It's such a huge piece of the practice, and it's essential because the world won't always understand. People won't always understand your choice. And sometimes maybe there is the question, right? When you're not firmly in the practice, the questions come, you question yourself. And it's about, can I stay true here? Can I cultivate compassion for myself as much as I have compassion for other people? And can I let myself evolve with my truth, letting my truth shift and change if it needs to, and I'm without making, myself feel like I've made the wrong decision or make me feel wrong, or, oh, I'm going back on what I thought. No, it's just non-attachment to the decisions you make.
Yeah.
Compassion for where you're at, and allowing yourself the freedom to express and explore without attachment to the outcome, without attachment to how it should be. And that definitely includes the idea of like, what makes me worthy, what makes me a worthy woman, what makes me have a fulfilled life, all of those things. So ultimately, yoga just reminds us that our deepest fulfillment doesn't come from ticking societal boxes. It comes from living in alignment. It's alignment. It's alignment to this vertical relationship, which takes time to cultivate, but it puts me in this beautiful place where I'm like, no, being child-free isn't lack. It's a huge expansion of my truth. It's a huge unfolding and a commitment to live honestly with myself in this creative way, and in service, and in a way that feels really true to who I am and to my soul, which is beyond my body and beyond everything else that I experience here in this lifetime.
Yeah. I agree with you that I mean, for me, arriving at this place, I actually probably, I mean, I've done my intermittent yoga and meditation practices. However, a couple of things that you say. First of all, I would reiterate, like, absolutely, it's a practice. And I understand with this decision, there can be an impatience and like, what's that quick fix? But it's essentially strengthening a sort of muscle. And I know for me, the more in small ways that I can even just kind of experiment with this notion of like, if you have a certain impulse, a desire, even if it runs contrary to maybe other voices in your life, just to like lean into that, feel that, what is it like to have that yes, please? And I think it can slowly build that trust and a greater, more easeful sense of being able to more definitively say yes and no. Like, I mean, Listen, I struggle with decisions at times, but I have to say and I don't want to treat it as like this external skill, like something I've improved at, but it's become so much easier because I'm so much more well attuned to what do I need? What do I want to feel myself, to be whole? And the more of that confidence we can cultivate in ourselves, it doesn't matter what other people are saying. It's like, you really don't care unless it's Granny and she's, on her deathbed. And then it's really sad. Exactly. Bless her soul. But and so it is challenging, but it is a place that we can arrive at. And it's one that it lives above and outside of any one decision. The second piece of that I just wanted to touch on again is this part about non-judgment and self-compassion. And I said it to my client just this morning. I said, if we are judging the part of ourselves that wants something, of course, we're not going to allow ourselves to have it. Like, and this was my story for a long time. I had huge judgment about what it meant to be a woman who didn't want kids, who didn't seem to have this innate desire for whatever reason. And until I could actually just offer myself some compassion and say, what if it's okay? And what if it's wonderful? And there's nothing wrong with you for wanting it. Until I could offer myself that compassion, I really couldn't affirmatively choose this child-free path, because there was another part of me that was constantly at war and going to battle and saying like, what the hell's wrong with you? Well, why would I choose something if I believe there's something wrong with me for wanting that, right? Is there something we can do to offer ourselves more compassion? Do you have any suggestions, or to lose that judgment?
Honestly, the practice, like, there needs to be you need to cultivate a relationship to self, and that, like any relationship, you have to put work into the relationship. And if every lived experience you have is through the self, then the relationship to self is the single most important relationship you'll ever have. Every other relationship in your life is based on the relationship you have to yourself, period, whether you like it or not. And so the more you cultivate that inner voice, that inner truth, that up vertical relationship, and that just takes practice. And that can be there's a whole host of different things that you can come to. But I think actually on a practical level, it's about saying, this needs to be my priority. I choose this. I choose this as a priority. And once you choose it as a priority, it then becomes easy. You allow for time for it because it's a priority. And so then when there's time for it, you have space for it and you go, okay, and then how does that space get filled? Which practices do I use? Which teachers do I go through? Teachers are very important and useful guides in these kind of self-inquiry moments. Teachers and coaches use these people, seek help, use the time wisely if you're going to take the time out. And I really just urge women, not just women, people, human beings. Ultimately, everything in your life is the way it is because you give it permission to be so. Everything in your life is the way it is because you give it permission to be so. And so once you really understand that and you start to take the bull by the horns and you start to take control of your own existence and the own reality that you're in, there's an element of that just involves spending time with self. Whether you like it or not, that becomes a priority. And so once you start choosing you, the rest of it just very, very quickly will unravel in the most profound and beautiful way because nature will just support it. That's how it works. So practically carve out the time. Make yourself a priority, carve out the time. And the rest, and find a teacher.
Well, and you said, even if you don't like it, but you will like it eventually, right? You will come to like and love yourself, which I know for many people feels,
It's just a thought though, but it's just, again, that's just a thought, right? There's this, I don't like, spending time. All of these things that you're saying are just thoughts and they're coming from the ego. The ego wants to keep us safe. And so again, it's examining these thoughts. It's examining this relationship to self. And it's challenging and horrible at times and stuff will come up and yes, all of these things. And what else are you doing? We're all walking towards death. So may as well make it fun.
Totally.
May as well make it interesting.
Absolutely.
May as well, do it properly.
Okay. We've talked a lot about relationship to self, and I thank you, Charlotte, for that. And I know at the end, I want to make sure to hear, because you yourself are a teacher and you've got perhaps some practices we can explore with you and alongside you. I want to talk about relationship to other and specifically the romantic partnership in your life. And I mean, it was sort of a footnote mention, but for those folks who don't follow Charlotte like myself on Instagram, you've been through an immense amount over these last couple of years, specifically in your previous marriage. You mentioned your husband was having an affair with your best friend. And now,
that was a surprise.
Oh my God. I mean, this is, okay. We've got a lot we could say about that. And now you are engaged to be married to a wonderful German-Danish man. I had to ask where her love is from, because I'm with a German. I've got a fond place in my heart for these Germans. Lovely Germans. So, I mean, briefly, how do we go from there to there? And specifically where it concerns this child-free, I'm reluctant to call it identity piece, because I know we want these identities to drop away, but how did that fit in? And you mentioned with your husband, your first husband, that your former husband, that both of you were on that same page initially, that neither of you wanted kids. Was it the same case with your current partner? And if so, was that something you sought out, or how did this all happen?
Yeah. So with James, it was my first husband. It was it just was spoken about very early on. We both didn't want children. It was what it was. Yeah, done. Fine, great. We never actually probably explored the depths of that together in a way that we could have done. And that was just the path of that relationship, and it was how it was. And I'm sure it played into the reason it ended the way it did, because all these things factor in, right? So yeah, but with him, it was one thing. And then when I met Simon, we're both very heavily on the spiritual path. So he is a yoga teacher. He's a musician primarily, and a yoga teacher. And we have the same teacher out in India. He's been with him for many, many years, longer than I have. And so he's very deeply in his spiritual practice. And so the conversations that we were having around just nature of self, for example, ahead of ever needing to even discuss child-free by choice we knew each other on a different level, due to the conversations that we were having, due to the spaces we were in, due to the practices we were, undertaking together. So, but interestingly, when we met, I was still married to my ex-husband. We were getting divorced, but these things take time, and I was heartbroken. I mean, let's not sugarcoat this. Like, I was in a horrible place when I first met him. And so it wasn't like we met him and we were together and it was all great. It was like, I just met this guy at this place in India at a time in my life where I was trying to put the pieces of myself and my life back into some sort of order and just try and understand, okay, well, how does this look, and how do I want to move forward with this, and who am I, and what does this mean for me? And so he was there during that whole time. And so the relationship has evolved into what is now going to be a marriage. And interestingly, it's a whole other podcast, I'm sure, the way that feels and looks and what that means, completely different compared to the first time, interestingly. But from the child-free by choice perspective, we only more recently have had a conversation around it ahead of us getting engaged, whereby I had this, guilt's the wrong word, but I'm going to use the word guilt because I can't think of a better one right now. I felt guilty because I was sure that I didn't want them. And if he chose to be with me, that was the choice he was having to make in that moment. And for a split moment, I was like, oh, that doesn't feel right. And luckily, we both have this deep understanding that change is the only constant in life. And so where we're at now is where we're at. What we want now is what we want. And within that, let's be kind to ourselves. And what's most important is that we choose each other. We're choosing each other. And that's what matters. And with that, for him, comes a woman who doesn't want to have children. And therefore, for him, comes a life without children. Oh, and that was what he said. And I was just like, well, that's, beautiful. And that's how I feel about it. And, but it was, there was a moment of like, oh, is this my fault that he's going to live this way? And he was like, it's like, I never really thought about it with my ex-partner. I guess I presumed that maybe we'd one day have them, but he's so grateful that we've explored it, right? We've really explored it and really dug into it and really gone, what do we want? If this is our life and we're choosing each other, what do we want? How do we want to experience this? And children aren't a part of that. And that, it was perhaps swayed by my initial decision.
Yeah.
And it's one that he's now choosing. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how, I feel like you both acknowledged and honored the self individually. For you, it's like, no, the child-free, that is my path. And also the we, as far as what do we choose together? How are we moving forward? And like you say, there was that weightedness, if you will, of, well, this is very clear that I do not have children. But it's a conversation that comes up with a lot of couples, but a similar dynamic, minus the terrible divorce piece, but prior to my relationship with my husband. But insofar as I would say would be more like true ambivalence, maybe the assumption, like a lot of people, that, perhaps one day. I very much was erring or leaning towards like no kids. And similarly, really felt like, in a way, like, oh, I can see that for you, that you could be a father. And I felt like I was taking it away. And as you say, maybe guilt's not the right word, but I think that probably was what I felt. And he reminded me, like, he has the autonomy to also choose what he says yes to, right? And it's not like I'm forcing his hand to do anything. And even if there was a perception that I was, that's still also, as you said early in the episode, something he's given permission to. Like, if you're allowing yourself, anyone listening, to be with a partner despite being at odds in this decision with them, that's not, and you don't feel good about that, that's not their fault. That's, I don't want to say your fault, but you're allowing that relationship to continue. And if you say yes to the relationship and that takes, let's say, perhaps greater precedence, or is that like leading factor for you versus the kids are child-free decision, then allow that to be, but don't like allow that to create resentment, right? It's like, if you're going in on it, go all in.
I mean, it's a part of me, right? And so and he knew that, he knows that, we know that it's a part of who I am. It's a part of my truth. And I guess he had to find his truth in it, in the circumstances he's in. And this is where we're at. But there's definitely there must be an honoring of your truth. And then a weighing up of, okay, if this is my truth, and had he wanted kids, right? Then there's a weighing up of, right, okay, I love you, you don't want them. I also love me and I do want them. And so where does that leave the we? Where does that leave us? But reviewing all of those different aspects is so crucial. And people just ignore those things so often. They just don't bother even looking at them. They're like, oh, it's uncomfortable. Let's not unpack this. And it's like, no, look at it, get it out there, get it discussed early on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Charlotte, before we wrap up, I want to hear, like, what do you love most about your life without kids? And maybe something you're looking forward to in the future.
How long have you got?
You've got a beautiful, delicious life, don't you?
Love my niece, my godchildren. I love sleeping. I love travel. I love my work. I really love my work. I feel so blessed that I get to experience the teachings that I teach and therefore experience life like that, like to be operating from this consciousness state that is interested in expanding. I just feel so grateful. I feel so grateful that that's how I get to experience this reality this time around. Like, such a blessing. Really, honestly, most of my life I'm in love with. I have a good time wherever I go. And sometimes life is shit. This is the thing to remember. I don't want to sugarcoat this. It's not that I'm saying everything's amazing, but even within the grips of grief, when I went through that rubbish time with my ex-husband, I still was cultivating this upward relationship to self, and the vibrancy of life and the bliss of existence was still there. And so it's really important to understand that you can still experience grief and loss and betrayal and heartache and simultaneously feel happy in a moment to be alive.
That resonates with me entirely. What she says is true, folks. Trust me. It's about, because that is the duality of existence. That is the duality of this reality we live in. It's, and then the understanding that there was only this immense grief because there was such immense love there. Like, I love these two human beings. It's my best friend and my husband, like literally two of the most important people in my life at that time. Why was I feeling so terrible? Because it's just an expression of love. Like, grief is just an expression of love. And so when there's an understanding of that, and you know yourself beneath all of the emotions, the highs and the lows, the expanded states and the seemingly shrunken, shriveled up, I want the world to swallow me up states, there's this underlying bliss in existence that just is it's the fabric of what my movement is. It's the fabric of how I have conversations, how I choose to, or at least try to have relationships. It's the fabric of which I build everything I do and everything that I don't do, everything I sit with. So life's just great. We're here for such a short time as well. We're here for such a short time, and people get so caught up in these mind games and this false ideas. And I feel very blessed to be sat in a body that has a broader understanding of this temporary existence. Where can we find you if we want to find out more about you? And I know you have a wonderful platform, a yoga portal platform with Simon. So I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yes. So we have an online yoga platform called insightout.yoga. And on that, we teach all sorts of different yogic technologies, from asana, which is the more traditional Western understanding of yoga, the movement side. So vinyasa, hatha. We teach asana, we teach meditation, we teach breath practices, which in yoga is called pranayama. We teach kriya yoga, which is a yogic technology that works to incorporate a few different things at any same time. So breath, movement, and awareness to cultivate a shift in your energetic state.
Interesting.
And they're super powerful, very, very powerful practices. We work with mantra. My partner Simon's a musician, so he does a lot with the voice and sound. And mantra is a very powerful yogic tool. If you think, all your thoughts are words, right? All your thoughts are sound vibrations, and that's all that words are. And so once you learn to cultivate sound and voice and mantra, once you learn to cultivate a healthy relationship with that, it's a hugely transformative life shift. And so he teaches a lot to do with voice and sound. And you can do that monthly, or you can subscribe to the year, or there's all sorts of different things. But essentially, we teach all of these for everybody. It's a very open to everyone. You don't have to have any experience. And really, we teach it from a space of these teachings are so accessible. You don't need to have certain clothing or own a yoga mat or need to go to a studio. And the way that we teach them on the platform is in such a way to make them accessible so that people can start to cultivate that vertical relationship to self and, expand their awareness, because they're such powerful tools and they've been so profound for both of us and for so many lives that we witness and so many of our friends that we teach with and to. And so, for us, it's just getting to share those teachings online and in person when we can. But online is such a great tool. Thank you to COVID for that, because really it just forced everyone online. And so, so that's where I am. But then it's Miss Shah Holmes on Instagram otherwise. And
Well, we will link to all the places in the show notes. I was perusing around the Insight Out. Yeah, very clever name. I see what you did there.
It was Simon. I can't take credit. He did a very, very good. Again, this is what I'm saying to you about the language, the vocabulary thing. It's not his first language yet. Insight Out Yoga came.
Yeah, very good.
Very good.
Thank you so much for coming on today. This conversation has truly been a gift. I'm really grateful that we can share it with all of our listeners, and of course, welcoming feedback from everyone to hear what's resonated with you and how this conversation has impacted you. So thank you. All right, I've been a little bit lax with you lately. Allow me to explain. So I get messages on Instagram to my DMs or emails pretty much every single day from you saying how much you love the podcast, how you've discovered the work I'm doing through the podcast, how much you love the conversations on the podcast. Lots of praise. Yes, it is wonderful for my ego. I always enjoy getting these messages. It makes me feel really grateful and appreciative when you take the time to reach out. But the reason I say I've been a little bit lax lately is because when I first started the podcast, if I get positive feedback from anyone about an episode or the show, I would say, I would love for you to do me a favor and leave a rating or a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And the last 2-3 months, I haven't been asking as much because, it's hard sometimes as a business owner and as a podcaster to say, hey, can you do me a little favor? But a big way the podcast gets discovered is through ratings and reviews. And it helps us to reach more people. And they really do make such a difference. I also, of course, love having this sort of social proof, if you will, to be able to show people this is what other people are saying and thinking about the podcast you want to tune into. So my ask of you, whether or not you've been one of those people who sent me a lovely note in the last 2-3 months, if I haven't asked you, I would love for you to leave either a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. We are so close to cracking 200 5-star ratings or reviews on Spotify. We're 9 away right now. Can we get there in the next week? I would love to get to 200 5-star reviews or ratings, I should say, on Spotify. So if you are listening and you have not yet done so, go into the app, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a rating or review. It will seriously take you 1 minute of your time, and I will be very grateful, and it will go a really long way to helping this podcast get out into more people who are on the fence's ears. That was a mouthful. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.